Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. It is Tuesday, January 8th, 2019. Time for another show and time for another round of nonsense from the Trump administration. And we put that in scare quotes. There's plenty going on today, and we will have to catch up with all of it. And then it'll all be erased, shaken up, and undone tonight when all of the major networks, and I guess all the minor networks too, will be airing live for some reason a Trump speech. Allegedly, it is said to be coming from the Oval Office. I am not 100% positive that it is coming from the Oval Office. This because, of course, the administration has said it is coming from the Oval Office, and so now we can't be sure. And, look, I don't know how to lay it out any clearer for you. You've seen the issues. You watched the stupid hand-wringing drama of it yesterday as network executives and anchors and reporters all wrung their hands in front of everybody over whether or not to answer the president's request for, and it is a request for free airtime for the president to give a major address, I'm sure he told them, on immigration and the national security crisis, the national emergency, which he totally made up. And tonight they gave it to him. Should we do it? Gee whiz, he lies all the time. Maybe we could do a fact check. And this was kind of upsetting too. I mean, I'm mad at you all, but I watched lots of good liberals and progressives say, no, they shouldn't do this without a live, simultaneous fact check going on. They should do a split screen with a fact checker on the other. It's all great. I mean, it's a nice fantasy and everything, and I won't ding you for fantasizing, but they can't do that. It doesn't exist as a technology. They can split the screens and they can try and do what they call a simultaneous fact check, but that stuff just moves too fast. Unless you can stop the audio from Trump and correct the record and then, only then, let the audio go forward, it can't be done. And I saw a lot of reporters saying, and a lot of a grassroots activist Dems who I know from online saying, oh, you could do it. It could be done. We won't. They won't. But we could. And a lot of smaller outlets, digital outlets said, well, we can do it. We've run simultaneous fact checks in the past. You really can't. You're always a couple minutes behind. At best, you can, because a lot of the lies are repeats. We did learn that from Daniel Dale and others. Many others have noticed that a lot of his lies are repeats, and so they're very happy, they're very proud of themselves. They would be able to, if they were given the chance, be ready with cards and on-screen graphics to virtually be in real time with him. As they see him, as they hear him launching into one of his familiar lies, they would be able to say, yeah, punch button number, and look on their sheet, 18, and bring up that graphic. There'll be a slight delay. They'll be slightly behind the curve. He'll probably be on to the next lie or an escalation of the lie you thought he was telling. By the time you get that graphic up, he'll stay one ahead of you for sure. I mean, it is possible to do if he goes to his old plays. Of course, if he gives you a variant, well, then you're going to be behind the eight ball on that one. And if you, again, I guess if you're at the point where you say, no, we can do this, if we can fact check him in real time because we're ready for it because he repeats his lies all the time, there's your answer on whether or not to air the guy's speech. He repeats his lies so frequently and so dependably, I guess, for lack of a better term, that your answer is no, we should not be airing this thing. Well, it's news. If the president says it from the Oval Office, it's news. In olden days, I suppose that was possibly true, but in the current situation, it's just not. And a good parallel to this, I guess, would be something else I happened to see on Twitter this morning and to react to. I didn't catch it when she said it, but I guess yesterday, Kirsten Nielsen had put out a statement that I guess a lot of people reacted to, and I grabbed somebody else's screenshot of her tweet in which she says, "The threat is real. The number of terror watch listed encountered at our southern border has increased over the last 2 years. The exact number is sensitive, and details about these cases are extremely sensitive." Now, before I even actually address that, or the substance of that, I guess, if there is substance to it, I'll add this. The reason she's saying this, the reason she's framing it in this way is because, as you know, in the recent past, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, in her capacity as spokesperson for the White House, has said that 4,000 terrorists, well, the way they put it, I guess, I don't know, I don't even have the quote in front of me, 4,000 terrorists have been stopped at the southern border, and that's why we need to increase our security measures down there. It's not so much migrants we're worried about as crazy terrorists sneaking into the country, trying to do us all harm. And, you know, that's what terrorists would want to do if they were sneaking into the country. I guess posing as Central Americans somehow. And that we're stopping them left and right, and which, of course, then leads you to wonder, why do you need more security? You seem to be doing great. You're rounding up thousands of them. The implication, of course, being, well, we're missing thousands more, or at least, you know, one more, and all it takes is one to get through, and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so I think people pretty immediately said, 4,000, what are you even basing that number on? Reality-based people as we are, we began to study judiciously, as we will, what she had to say. And there was lots of hemming and hawing, and, well, you know, she may mean over a longer period of time, and she may mean people on terror watch lists who are not necessarily themselves terrorists, but they are suspected of some connection to some terrorist-related activity. For instance, it could be somebody who's connected to an organization that has been implicated in money laundering operations that it is suspected that terrorist groups may use to try to fund their activities. I don't know. And that person has a similar name to the person who they're actually looking for, so we detained him. So a lot of it could be mistakes, but it's worse than that. And after diving into it, I saw NBC repeatedly blathering last night about how they had fact-checked this down. And, so they got a hold of a number that they thought was more appropriate. The number of people stopped for suspicion of connection with terrorist activities at the southern border in the last 2 years is actually 6 and not 4,000. Now, originally I had thought it might be 0, but apparently they decided to go with the number 6. Now, so they were crowing yesterday, NBC was, we nailed them. They said 4,000. We said it's 6. What do you have to say about that? Sarah Huckabee Sanders, you liar, you smoky-eyed liar. Oh, my goodness. No, everybody boycott because we said that. Yada, yada. And they have no comment. Oh, no, you know, you define your numbers differently or blah, blah, blah. Caught them dead to rights. They're liars, and everybody knew it, and everybody knew the number was going to be closer to 0 than even 1,000, much less 4,000. And lo and behold, about a day later, it turns out to be true. But by that evening, NBC News crowing that they are finding the official mouthpieces of the White House to be incredible liars, and incredible in both senses of the word, and probably a couple more if you can think of any. But they then said, well, you know, President, Oval Office, it's kind of new. And besides, all the other kids are doing it, and we're going to look terrible if we don't also air this thing. You just said you caught them in a huge lie. And it is a huge lie. But you're going to give them air anyway. Because president. So it's the dumbest thing you ever heard, but it's exactly what you thought they were going to do with this thing. So then Kirsten Nielsen, I guess in reaction to all this, by 8 o'clock last night is tweeting, no. Stop dismissing the idea that just because we missed by, you know, X billion %, whatever it's going to be, you know, so 3,994 shy of the mark. Also, That doesn't stop her. But she goes on to say the threat is real. Okay, so the number is different. The exact number is sensitive, and details about these cases are extremely sensitive. What she's trying to say is, trust me, the threat is real. The number of terror watch listed encountered at the southern border, it's different. It's classified. I can't tell you. I can tell you, but I'd have to kill you, something like that. You can't know, you peons. We know, but we can't reveal it to you. Now that is the kind of claim that automatically provokes a lot of suspicion whenever anybody makes it, any administration makes it, and rightly so. But this is the moment you've been, well, not that we've been waiting for, because we've been here before, honestly, even with this administration. But this is a great teachable moment. It's just that no one's going to listen. If what she was saying were true, and it is not, because ordinarily I say we don't know if it is. Now, we know it isn't. It's not true. And I can offer you this proof. The current cabinet secretary under the Trump administration has said it. That's all you need to know. They say it. That's wrong. It's not true. Are they fudging? Are they lying? Are they making it up? I don't know exactly which one it is. It's just not so. They don't. That's the practice. They will not tell you the truth. They can't. They don't want to, and they won't, and they can't. So stop worrying about it. You know you're right. Just go ahead and say it's not true. Now, if it were really true, and I could see it being true if it were coming from anybody else, that there really was a worrisome number of terror watch listed people being encountered at the southern border, and they were serious suspects, I could see a real administration being cagey about those numbers for various reasons. The fact that Kirstjen Nielsen says it, of course, makes me say, well, I'm sorry, you work for Trump, and I know that you might not even be in control of what you're saying. You're being instructed to say this stuff for whatever reason, and now you're doing it. And you can see the fudging in the wording that she chooses. The exact number is sensitive, and the cases are extremely sensitive. Is it classified, or isn't it? It's not, is it? If it was, you would say it was classified. Of course, if you said it was classified, I would say, that means it's not classified. That's one of the drawbacks of all this. And then what I'm getting at here is, this is the point at which, if what she had to say was true or even nearly true, you would have been able to depend on your hard work at safeguarding your administration's, or even just your department's, sterling reputation for truth-telling. And that would be what saves you from the cynicism and the dismissal. People would say, well, they don't just lie willy-nilly. There are consequences to just making stuff up. People do it. They get caught from time to time. Administrations embarrass themselves with embellishing the facts or twisting them or spinning them. But it always stops short of sheer fiction, because they know what can happen if you get caught doing that. This administration does not know or care or believe in those costs, so they just make it up. Now, in other words, long story short, it's the boy who cried wolf. Although these days we know that even young girls can grow up to cry wolf if they really want to, and they work hard and play by the rules, which is, of course, that would be out of keeping with the idea of crying wolf. But the point is, anybody can do it. And that explains the situation shortly and succinctly. But I think for political science purposes, it's worth expanding on the point a little bit. An administration normally trades in trust and avoids undermining that trust for moments like this. The reason we have the internally contradictory web of national security law that we have, the reason it is arguably sustainable, and I say arguably only because I could argue my way out of it pretty quickly, I think. But the reason we regard it as sustainable is that ordinarily presidents and the people who work for them don't lie with impunity and don't make sport of it. And so when the Secretary of Homeland Security says, listen, I can't tell you it is classified or sensitive or it risks something to American operatives at home or abroad. But you're going to have to take my word for it. You know how it is. I can't reveal all the state secrets here. But trust me when I tell you that there's a very important reason for having to do things this way. And you can test it and you can push and people sue and people jab and poke and prod as often and as hard as they can. And it usually runs into a wall. Really here it runs into a legal wall in courts where the courts say essentially the same thing. We have to trust our administration at some level, and we can review these things also at some level, and we can have in camera or in chambers secret national security level discussions about the hows and whys and wherefores of keeping certain things secret, just so that there's somebody somewhere in a position of responsibility, a judge ordinarily, informed about what's the calculus of the decision making here. Not every single detail is always revealed to them, but enough in order to enable them to say, all right, as suspicious looking and weird and icky feeling as this whole secrecy thing is, it's been reviewed by a judge. Now, of course, you have judges along the lines of, Brett Kavanaugh is a Supreme Court justice, obviously. He wouldn't be the one hearing things like this. But the Brett Kavanaugh types are now all over the federal judiciary, including, of course, and here this becomes important again, too. It's not just an annoying thing that the Trump administration keeps trying to, and sometimes actually succeeds in, placing on the federal bench judges or judicial nominees who are rated as not qualified by the American Bar Association. It's not just a matter of, well, that guy's a bad lawyer or he doesn't know what he's doing. These federal judges in some cases are going to be the ones making decisions about, should I let this otherwise possibly or arguably illegal or unconstitutional thing go forward based on emergency powers or claims of emergency powers or claims that the information is somehow classified or not, not suitable for public consumption in some way, or at least public distribution. And I'm going to have to check into this. It's not just that they are politically biased and so they will say, okay, sure, go ahead and do that. But that even if they weren't, they might actually just be intellectually incompetent to the task of fairly weighing the question of whether or not the information is classified, should be classified, is actually dangerous, is a sufficient basis for claiming the secrecy and other cover that the government desires in this calculus. So that's dangerous all by itself. But like I said here, Kristen Nielsen is depending on, she's writing a check she can't cash here. There's no reason in the world to trust her or anyone else in the administration to be telling the truth about what is actually happening here and or the nature of the information about what's happening. Is it sensitive or is it classified? Sensitive isn't a thing. Sensitive is, I don't want to tell you because I'm going to look bad. Classified is, I don't want to tell you because it's going to run a greater risk to the country if you find out. And by the way, the entirety of the body of national security and state secrets law is all about the question of where you can and can't, should and shouldn't draw the line as between what is truly a risk to national security and the fudging that goes on in every administration, really, about, well, we think this is a risk to national security, and how is it a risk to national security? And at bottom, what it means is it will embarrass the administration and put us in a weaker negotiating position with somebody somewhere, and the weaker we look, the more danger we're in national security terms. And so that's the national security question at hand here. We think it's a matter of national security that it's important as a matter of national security that we not look weak. We not look like liars. We not look venal and stupid. So, for instance, we're going to classify, and this is the classic case now of state secret stuff. We're going to classify information about the crash of a military aircraft. Not, as we implied when we said national security was at stake, because the technology on board the aircraft was so advanced and top secret, and we don't want the enemy to find out about how we're, our sources and methods of intelligence gathering with this kind of spy plane, but rather because we made an actual mistake in the contracting here, and we gave the contracting away to a crony, and problems with the engines on this plane cropped up, and we knew that it was a crash risk, but we didn't act on it, and it crashed. And now if we let the enemy find out that we're stupid about procurement and it's largely driven by cronyism rather than actual military performance, we're going to look stupid, and it's going to undermine the credibility of our counter threat in NATO, and so therefore national security. And courts have bought that, by the way, and only later on in review realized, we really probably shouldn't have allowed cases like that to fall under the state secrets doctrine. Anyway, all I'm really saying here, like I said, long story longer, I guess is what I'm doing here. Kirstjen Nielsen in a prior administration might have been able to make this claim. The threat is real. The number of terror watch lists that encountered at our southern border has increased. The exact number is sensitive, and details about the cases are extremely sensitive. And if it were true, we would be screwed all the more, because it would be true, and we would absolutely need leeway from the public and from policymakers who are doubting the numbers, and from other critics. We would need leeway to do the right thing to keep the American people safe, whatever that might mean. That would be the claim. And if there were really terrorists streaming across the border, secrecy might, in some cases, be the order of the day. We would need it. We would want it. We would require it. And now, if there were a real judge involved in these cases, and I'm not certain that there will be when they do finally get to court, we won't be able to have the security, the national security we need, in terms of the secrecy that we need in order to do this operation, whatever it's supposed to be, sufficiently and professionally and legally. It's going to get screwed up because they've lied so much, and they're no longer entitled to a presumption that they are telling the truth. And that's ordinarily going to make it very difficult for them to pull this stuff off. I guess here you could argue, no. So it's a good thing that we have incompetent judges in place, because they will award this ability to the administration regardless, and then we'll be able to do the thing, except, of course, it's all being executed by incompetence, and now it's just effed up and secret, and we all get killed in a terrorist attack, but we don't find out why until somebody finally publishes the book that tells us why, which is another arm of our big problem here, that tonight this speech is going to air, and everybody knows it's going to be BS. Everybody knows it's going to be full of lies. They're not going to be able to really fact check it in real time. It's going to be hours at best, days, if we're lucky, before the record is fully developed on what gets lied about tonight. And the reporters and executives and editors who weigh in on the decision to allow this travesty to go forward will know that it's coming with absolute certainty, and they will giggle and guffaw about it amongst themselves tonight and roll their eyes and pound their desks tonight as it happens. And tomorrow they'll write a little bit about it. And in 3 years, we'll all pay big bucks, whatever, for their best-selling books telling all about how they knew at the time but didn't do anything about it. So that's another rather frustrating aspect of all this. I'm done. We're not going to talk about it anymore, except for the next segment, which comes up after our break. Not quite here yet, when Armando will join us. And you know how he is. He'll have a thing or two to say in measured terms about what's going on tonight and how we ought to react to it. And then by, 9:35 or so, we'll be on to other topics. Gardening tips, how to winterize your home, et cetera, et cetera. All the good stuff that the rest of the news channels are actually spending their time on today. Terrific. All right. Well, there's lots to go at here, and maybe what we can do with our second segment when Armando is here, he's pointing me to a couple of articles. I have some similar ones here. I guess one of the things we want to ring the alarm bells about tonight is this. I think Trump talked them into giving him airtime, and this is a problem all by itself, too. It's just one more aside. Trump's record is rife with instances in which he promised to major networks and others that he was going to give a major address about something important sounding, only to disappoint, only to have turned out to have lied about the whole thing and take them on something else. The example that sprung immediately to mind was, I'm going to give a major speech, reversing my birthism, renouncing my birtherism position. And all the networks thought, birtherism, big deal, we'll all go. Everybody send reporters, they go. And what he ended up doing, all he did was say, Obama was born in the United States, that's it. No questions. You can't ask me any questions about anything. And by the way, we're having this press conference at my new hotel in Washington, D.C., and why don't you come and take the tour of the premises with me? You'll see it's a fabulous hotel. We have all the best world-class everything here. And they all went too. And didn't he at that point? Yeah, that's right. I think the grudging one, reminded me of this, or was it someone else who brought this up? Maybe it was Der Wooter who brought up that was the press conference at which he started flirting with a reporter, right? And brought her up to the podium and went through a mock interview. You should be working for me at my hotels or my large business empire. And he interviewed this woman who was supposed to be there as a reporter. I don't know if it affected her objectivity or not. But anyway, this is one of several examples where he has promised a major address. And on that premise, the networks and major media outlets have dedicated staff or airtime to the thing, only to have him, spend 2 seconds talking about something sort of related to what he said he was going to talk about, and then spinning off into, his usual babble. Anyway, we haven't even gotten to the fact that I think he talked them into it by hinting to them that he would be declaring this so-called state of emergency tonight. So maybe in the next segment we can talk about how dangerous it is that he's actually in a position to be able to do that. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, with a brand new interruption, though it's still aimed at saying thank you to all of you who are supporters of the show. We've made a lot of progress. When we first started this campaign, fewer than 1 in 25 regular listeners were donating to help keep us on the air, and now that's down to about 1 in 15, but we've got a long way to go. Remember, it won't take much. Our average monthly donation is currently about $7, for which you're getting 2 hours of great news and entertainment 5 days a week. What's that, 70 cents an hour? That's a pretty good deal. But as a wage, well, I think Democrats would be against that. But if we all put our 70 cents together, or even half of us, that'd really be something. And my kids could go to college. Now, that's not all on you. But remember, patreon.com, Patreon.com, is there to make it easy. You can find us there by searching Kagro X, or David Waldman, or Kagro in the Morning, or even Daily Coast Radio in their search box, and you'll be right there where you need to be to make easy, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Once again, thanks so much for your continuing support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Armando is here and ready to join us. We've got, I'll prepare the groundwork here by saying if the president is, and I hesitate to use that term, I really do, because it's dangerous, and we should understand that. Yeah, basically. Oh, and by the way, I don't know if you've seen this thing, but I think, my new favorite thing is somebody figured out that if you take any video clip of Trump and slow it down to half speed and play it, he begins to take on the correct characteristics. He sounds like a drunk in a dive bar, like droning on about another thing I would do about national security. And it works fantastically. And perhaps we should even play a little just to lighten the mood here, but maybe later, because we got to get to this. Two things happening here. If he were to declare a state of emergency today, there are two areas of inquiry the press is busying itself with, besides being taken advantage of, again, and that is, one, the declaration of emergency. Can Trump use it to build the wall? That is his supposition. And he's hinted at it over the last couple of days, which of course means that the administration now on the record has made a statement that says that they think they can do it, which of course, as you know, means that they can't. They don't know what they're doing. But they've put administration lawyers to the work of coming up with something that sounds legalish that they can argue. That means I can send the army. I mean, I think this is the way Trump envisions it. I'm going to send the army, and they have shovels and hammers and whatever, and they're going to build a wall for me, and I can order the army to do it because I'm the commander-in-chief, and the money will come from blah, 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 a thing. There are mechanisms out there to reprogram funds, not nearly enough to build the wall, so he's just going to steal it from something else and say emergency. So we'll go through some of their reasoning, but
that actually doesn't work.
It doesn't
in the statutory scheme.
No, so I'll lay out this, and we'll come back to this one here. So there's one line of writing that says, nah, that doesn't really work, and you probably anticipated that was the case, and we'll have Armando explain that. The other line of inquiry that isn't making a claim about what works and what isn't, but is rather saying it's a warning. If the president declares a national emergency, it depends on the wording of it, which means they'll screw it up. They'll do it improperly. And Stephen Miller will write, I just broke the glass. So there you go. I'm declaring an emergency. That doesn't work. There's magic words you have to say. They might have people who know. They might not.
No, I mean, it's actually fairly simple to declare the emergency. The National Emergencies Act is pretty broad in granting the president power.
Yes.
What does that trigger is the issue, but
right.
Finish your preface.
I guess the other thing is, so others are writing, okay, if he were to successfully and competently say the right things in order to declare a thing that the courts might tend to recognize as a valid declaration of a national emergency, here is a list of other very onerous and dangerous sounding powers which existing statute would then grant the presumption, at least, that the White House would be able to unilaterally order. And as you can imagine, they're scary and meant for competent hands and steady hands on the rudder and within a functioning administration, and not a bunch of acting cabinet members and not a bunch of kooks at that. And it's broad and dangerous powers that you would only barely trust to the best America has to offer. And now you have instead this. So we'll start on the specific side. Can he build this wall with it?
Well, let's talk about the basics. The presidents declare states of emergency all the time, as you know.
Yes. Even Trump has
hurricane
done
happened, state of emergency. The wildfires in California, state of emergency. What does that trigger? Is really the question. Can he say it's a state of emergency? Yes, I guess he possibly can.
Can he
I
tweet
think
it?
That's the less interesting question. I think the more interesting question is what does it mean?
Okay.
And what powers does it trigger?
Yes.
Well, this is where you get to, because why is he doing it? He's doing it to get out of this wall mess he's created for himself. So he wants to be able to tell his people, well, don't worry about Congress. I did this. We're going to get the wall, or at least we're going to start with the wall. All right. So there's two statutes, and I sent you a link to a story by Bobby Chesney, which is a decent primer. I just think it misses a lot of issues. But let's start with it. The one that really matters is 2293, because the other one really says requires the military to be involved. There's no requirement here that the military be involved. You can't say because Congress didn't fund it, I have to use the military. That's not how you can read the statute. So there's one that says may. That's I believe it's 182293. Or I could have the chapter wrong, but it's section 2293.
Yes.
And it talks about may. And what can he do? Well, if you need the military for construction, for military purposes, but military purposes is actually defined as things that have to be done for the military. Mm-hmm. That is, building forts. It's often used to create, if you're in Afghanistan and you need an outpost, the president has the freedom to, I'm going to take these funds and I'm going to build an outpost. I have this basket of money that's available for this type of military use.
Okay.
And therefore I'm doing it. Well, there's problem number one. There is no allocation. There's no funding that you can shift to this that's on the books. There's nothing that says, I know here for the military, is this basket of money so they can build a wall on the southern border. So there's really nothing to draw if you're going to be strictly by the book. There isn't. Now, there is military funding. We know that they have $8 million hammers and stuff. So they could buy 100 less $8 million hammers and they can get started. But,
I guess. Then we're hammerless.
But the reality is they're not supposed to do that. But let's suppose he does do that. What other obstacles? Suppose a court says, well, okay, he's the president, though. I'm going to let him do it. He's the commander-in-chief.
Oh, yes.
And they say go.
All right.
Well, there's another problem here. And it's this. The Congress has chosen to not fund the wall at this time. They didn't fund it for 2 years when it was under Republican control. And now that the Democrats have the House, they're saying we'll never fund the wall. So the Congress has, by omission, said no to this so far, right?
Yeah, although, yeah.
Well, what do you mean?
Oh, I'm just thinking later on when the emoluments case comes up and they say, see, by omission this time they've said yes.
Well,
but okay.
The problem with that argument is that it's not dependent on Congress, the emoluments. It's dependent on reading the Constitution with its plain text. Being
Congress
a
that can
textualist,
authorize
an
it.
originalist,
Yes.
an originalist has to say, well, it says right there, no emoluments. So let's look up emoluments in the dictionary. What does it mean? Oh, it means everything. So the emoluments cases aren't actually impacted. The Congress can approve it.
Yes.
Remember, the idea is the Congress can approve it.
Yes, it should be interpreted
So
that
if they
way.
choose not to approve it, it's actually much more analogous to the wall. So the Congress can approve a wall, but if it doesn't, you don't get to do it.
Yeah, we don't get the default isn't you can do whatever you want unless Congress says no. It's you can't do this or anything
Unless
like
Congress
it unless
says
Congress
yes.
says yes.
All right. So we go there. So there's really nothing there. So, but as I said, suppose the statutory stuff falls. You get this hack judge in Texas who you get that they go and sue there because, hey, it's Texas. And he issues an order and you're gone. But then you go to the constitutional question, which is what is the power granted the president in the Constitution? Well, it's not the power of the purse. The president doesn't get to appropriate.
Right.
Congress does. Congress did not appropriate for a wall. They did not appropriate for military construction of a wall. So
that is true.
So the Constitution pretty clearly says that absent the Congress appropriating for this wall, there's no national emergency that permits the president to do this. All right. Now, for example, you say, well, let's say there was a legitimate military problem on the border. And that is, there were El Chapo militia attacking the border. Pancho Villa came back to life, whatever you want to say.
That is happening right now.
Well, that's what we'll hear tonight in this speech,
Yes.
I imagine.
Pancho Villa.
All right.
All right, go on.
All right. But here's what the fact is. Congress has appropriated money for the defense of the country, military defense. There are funds available to deploy troops to the border.
Yes.
For example, I guess he could call it a national emergency. He could say it's a military problem, and he could do that, put 100,000 troops on the border to stop all these invaders. I actually think he could do that under the law. I think he has the power as commander in chief. He's got Congress has probably given him enough appropriations that are discretionary that he could do a deployment to the border.
I mean, there's not an invasion, but he could certainly say there is one, and we got to go.
Well, at that point, he's the commander-in-chief. They got to defer. All that stuff sort of works here. That's the president at this highest ebb of his power. And I use the phrase ebb, highest ebb and lowest ebb, for a particular reason. And you of course know, Kagro, about the case I'm going to be talking about now, the steel seizure cases from 1952.
Yes.
The steel seizure cases involved Harry Truman taking over steel mills that were on strike. And this was during the Korean War. As President Trump himself says this day, steel is a national security issue.
Right.
Harry Truman said steel was a national security issue. We need to build tanks, or we need to build whatever the heck we were building.
A wall out of tanks.
For the war in Korea.
Yeah.
And he seized the steel mills.
He did.
And the steel owners who had standing, clearly their mills were seized, and they sued, and they went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said to President Truman, "You can't do that."
Yeah.
Now there's a lot of opinions, but the one that everyone likes, I like other opinions better, but the general sort of accepted condition has been cited as sort of the lead of that case is Justice Jackson's concurrence. And he created that 3-part test about the president's level of power and how much deference you give it and whether he can do it or not. And he has the highest, the president's exclusive power under Article 2. That's his power at its highest ebb. You give a lot of deference to it. Of course, when there's an explicit constitutional prohibition, then then it runs into that. But suppose the Constitution's silent, then you probably then it goes through there's shared, and then you got to really see what Congress has said or done, and then there's the lowest when he's stepping into Congress's exclusive domain, i.e. appropriations, for example, I think would be considered. Yes. I would argue
bean soup in the Senate.
Right. What I would argue is the president would be stepping into the congressional power of the purse. But at the very least, he's in a shared responsibility situation at worst and at best for him. And if you apply that, there's no express authorization. In fact, Congress has taken up the issue, and there's a ongoing political fight on this policy.
Yeah.
The Congress has power over immigration. We know because the Congress passes laws on immigration. There's a reference to naturalization processes in the Constitution itself, Article 1, Section 8. So you can't argue that what Trump is doing is not impinging on the congressional power. So you've got that problem. Well, what about this emergency argument? Well, there's I'll use my old refrain. Well, show me in the Constitution where it says emergencies. It doesn't. And the other thing it does that I would point you to is Justice Jackson taking on Truman, making the emergency argument in the steel seizures cases. And he says emergencies don't create constitutional power. They create conditions where constitutional powers should be exercised.
Okay.
If the president can't convince the Congress to address the emergency in the way he wants, he doesn't get to just make it up. Again, this is not new, and I'm not positing something that the Supreme Court hasn't said.
Right.
It said all these things during an actual war.
Yes. During the good old days.
The good old days.
When America was great.
Do that. Give those people their steel mills back.
Right.
All right, so then you've got the following. Well, what's the standing issue? Well, there might have been an interesting standing question, but that's been obliterated. The House has stood in front of the Supreme Court as a party challenging the president because they said he violated their laws. That standing issue is over. How can they possibly back down now that we only have a special standing provision for when the Republicans control. Republicans have standing, but Democrats don't is the only way you can read it. There's just no standing issue here. Absolutely, in my view, and it should be, but it is. I think it's bad law, but the entirety of the standing jurisprudence is bad law. And they can't, I guess they can, the Power Five. They can say, oh, you don't have standing. So, I don't, because I said so, you don't have standing. Could be the entirety of the opinion. Yep. So I don't think he can do it. Now, I actually favor, as a political matter, and as a policy matter and as a practical matter, I favor Trump declaring a national emergency if he also ends the shutdown.
Yeah, that's, I think, the play that people are looking for is he declares the emergency, says the Army's going to build it, and therefore I no longer need to have this confrontation with Congress, and so the government reopens, and then he later loses in court, and we get no wall and no emergency and an open government.
Right. And he say, well, look, tells his base, I fought for it. I declared an emergency. The courts are terrible. You know, we need to impeach these judges, whatever the hell he's going to say,
Right.
because, you know, that of course is the other aspect of this story. I mean, I think that is the analysis on the national emergency question. And I don't think his speech may not declare national emergency, but he'll basically lay out his case, political and otherwise, for why it is a national emergency. I assume that his advisors are not complete idiots, and that could be an idiotic assumption on my part. But I'm going to assume, for the sake of argument, that they know that whatever he says now is setting up a case, possibly, where he's going to have to defend invoking a national emergency to build this wall.
Yeah. Well, he may need to do that. I guess he could come up short of it, and I think I would. I don't know whether I would find that more interesting, entertaining, funny. I'm not sure. If just in terms of the question of demanding time from the networks, probably by promising them or dangling the possibility that a national emergency could be declared, and that would be the sort of thing you might want to cover, and then not do it. I changed my mind. I was gonna, but I realized I didn't have to.
Right. Well, you know, the other part of why I think it would be good, people need to wake up to what the danger is of this guy, because you can't put anything past him. I mean, he I don't know what the framework would be. I can't think of specifically what he would do, but I could see him locking up people and closing down media institutions and having people arrested and being like Saudi Arabia and just putting everybody in the Ritz-Carlton and start torturing people.
Why not?
He's not beyond that, and this is the one thing that I don't think people ever grasp. It's true that there are guardrails in this country that have stopped him, but if he was, I don't know, pick the Banana Republic or pick the Egypt. If he was the president of Egypt, he'd be arresting people just like El Sisi and torturing them and shutting down newspapers and doing all those things. That's who he is.
Yeah. I mean, that's what he'd like to be. I mean, he actually aspires to that.
Yeah, I think that, you know, there's discussion of these things, and yet we don't just deal with that basic personality construct of who this guy is. He's capable of all those things if he can get away with it.
Yeah. I mean, if you'll let me do it, I mean, a lot of people would say
it's important, and I think beneficial in this sense, that people know it in a situation that might be manageable for us, which is, look at him. He didn't get his way. First time he faces opposition in Congress, what does he do? Declares martial law.
Yeah.
Well,
or very nearly. Certainly.
Very nearly. Well, it's a species of martial law.
Yeah.
He's invoking his power as commander-in-chief. You know, it's like in Turkey, whenever the army would come out and say, no, you can't be president. We're arresting you. Come over here. Right?
Yeah.
So I think that it has that benefit as well. Now, the third thing I would talk about, and then I'll stop and let you react to it, is the reaction to Trump by the media in this, I think, shameful moment where they have given him their airwaves.
Yes.
For what is, I mean, patently, obviously, almost admittedly, a partisan political situation. Now, if you were going to take the position that the president gets our airwaves whenever he asks for it, you know, in reasonable chunks of time, and you live by it, and you were like, okay, everybody can, you know, we're not going to make that judgment. The president asked for 10 minutes, we're going to give him 10 minutes. But that's not what they do.
No.
They say no. And we have the benefit of knowing when they say no and on what issues. You read it, you know it, you probably said it. In 2014, Obama wanted to give a speech on immigration, and the network said no.
Yeah. Well, they didn't say no to the speech. They just said no to covering it. and he gave the
No
speech.
to giving me the 10 minutes that I asked for from the Oval Office.
He gave the speech. Others, I guess, videotaped it and passed it around on YouTube or whatever.
I'm sure. Listen, who remembers?
Yeah,
but
I don't know what he said.
Ted Koppel in the New York Times quoted saying, "Well, when the president asks you for time, you got to give it." Except that's not true.
That was back when America was great, you did it because it was prudently used. A president would be embarrassed to request time of the networks and get out there and say nothing or babble or have a stroke on television.
Well, absolutely, and if this was a normal president, I would still say it's shameful that the mistreatment then of Obama, if you want to put it that way, or the favored treatment that the Republican president is getting. But this is worse. Here's a man who, as again, I reference it as the Kagro rule. Whatever they say, it's almost certainly the opposite.
Yes. Well,
there's a surge in terrorism. People turning away. It's almost certainly the opposite is true. There's probably been a huge decline.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a huge decline in a number of people trying to cross the border, but you would not know it from what they say. You would if you knew how to read a Trump comment, but they run around saying, "Oh my God, we're under siege. It's an attack. There's a caravan. It's a huge spike in numbers. It's at its lowest. Speaking of low ebbs, lowest ebb in a decade." But whatever, we're going to have a national emergency now that there's less of it happening.
So we know for a fact. We know. I'm not guessing. We know that Trump will lie to us for 8 minutes.
Yes.
They know he's going to lie to us for 8 minutes.
Yes.
A responsible news organization does not let someone just premeditatedly lie to the American people for 8 minutes.
Yes. Well, yeah. All right. I'll hold on.
No, I think
okay.
You go because I'd like to hear
a
journalistic defense to turning over your airwaves. You're not bringing him on for an interview.
No, we're turning over. I don't know. One, I assume they're going with, the newsworthiness of any president speaking from the Oval Office. Well, it wasn't newsworthy when President Obama wanted to speak from the Oval Office, so that's all right. Well, we made a mistake there. They haven't said that, but
how convenient.
They haven't said that, and it would be nice if they did. But it would only be a convenient cover at best. But he is going to lie, and as a matter of fact, my marker is out there that
he's going to lie about everything. There's not going to be one true thing he says to me.
Well, that's probably all easy enough to conclude. I'm betting he'll actually repeat the 4,000 terrorist lie, despite the fact that everybody rejected it yesterday. And the only caveat is that he might change the number and move upward.
5,000.
Yeah, now it'll be 5,000. That is absolute. I'm not kidding. It is characteristic of everything he does. And talk to Daniel Dale about it. He'll probably bet the same thing. He's done this before 1,000,000 times. Granted, never from the Oval Office yet, but for some reason, who is it? Glenn Kessler thinks, he wouldn't dare from the Oval. They're gonna clean up his act.
Oh my God, he did not say that.
Well, he didn't say that he would, but that was the premise of his tweet. Was they've lied and lied and lied, but will they clean up their act for this because it's something official from the Oval Office and it's on all the networks?
Clean up his act. He's going to come argue for a wall that was created.
Well, that's
so
why
he remembered to say
this.
immigration in his freaking speeches.
Yes, that is news over the last couple of days too. Apparently, the wall. I put this in the wall as metaphor category. It was never intended to actually happen. It was just a mnemonic device for him so that he would rant about immigration.
That's why he kept saying Mexico would pay for it, because it was fun to say.
Yeah, and that was that. So that was an interesting development over the last day or two. But I think he comes back and does the 4,000 terrorists. Whether he puts a number to it or not, I'm not really sure. But if he does, it'll probably be more than 4,000. But he's done this before in the past where the press have debunked a specific lie from his speeches, and it has run debunked for a week, and he comes back at the next rally and says it again. Again and again, and they keep saying
the trade deficit with China. There's everything.
Right.
coal industry is back. They're building plants in the steel plants in America again.
Every
The
single
car
one of
companies
them
are coming back.
fundamental
All
to his
lies.
platform. All of them fundamental to his platform. All of them without which he wouldn't be able to do what he does or be who he is. And so I imagine this would follow the same pattern. And, you know, I mean, I would love to, I don't understand. I'm going to watch this happen, and he's going to tell the same lie. NBC couldn't stop crowing about having debunked this thing yesterday. They're going to use NBC's air to tell it again. And then what? It's like this is one of those things that
my problem with the journalism here.
we should all be allowed to punch everybody at NBC in the face.
If he
one
wants
American
to go on
at a
an
time.
interview with Lester Holt and lie, and Lester Holt can challenge him, I guess, you don't turn that down.
Yeah.
But that's not what you're doing. You're giving him 8 minutes of your airtime.
Yeah. 8 minutes. It's not even going to. That's ridiculous.
It's
He's
going to be
hold
10
to 8
probably,
minutes.
or 12 or whatever.
Last night, right. Soon. It'll end very soon. 2 weeks. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. We'll see what happens. Maybe 8 minutes, could be 10.
Unfiltered
20.
lies are being offered in the name of journalism. That's not right. There's
No.
something wrong with your model when you think that's appropriate.
And so far, their reaction to that very, realistic accusation is, now they're going to offer a democratic response. That doesn't really help things. I mean, it's better than nothing, I guess. But yeah, I'm not for that.
They didn't break glass for that. They gave John Boehner a chance to rebut President Obama in 2011.
Right,
so
that's true.
Don't think they're doing us any special favors.
No, I don't. Yeah, and I don't regard it as a special favor. I just regard it as now this charade goes on for even longer. And in a way, I mean, I'm not going to tell Democrats not to go do it, but in a way, it legitimizes the stolen 8 minutes as an official function in some way, and that you should take what was said in it seriously, because it now looks like a State of the Union, which is also full of lies or whatever. But even so, people turn that stuff off. The networks claim they can do fact checking quickly enough. They can't. It's a lie. That technology doesn't exist. That's why he's doing it on TV, because he knows he can't be caught. We'll take our break. It'll just be 1 minute. We'll be back. We got to talk about this all day, I think.
Journalists do, right?
Yes, we're coming back in now. Welcome back to the
didn't
show.
know the Gulf of Tonkin speech was a lie. I didn't know.
We weren't supposed to.
I was young.
Exactly. I
Exactly.
only knew because I learned it in the history book. So here's what happened with the Gulf of Tonkin thing, and it was a lie. Oh, right. But at the time, you see, people didn't know. I see.
I mean, Johnson wasn't on tweeting lies every day.
Yeah.
And going out and saying, and on this specific issue, he's done nothing but lie.
Mm-hmm.
The entire issue is a lie.
Seth Michaels now saying the same thing here, in case you follow along with Seth. The president is 100% going to use the completely fictional 4,000 number tonight. It will be the core of his argument. Again, my only caveat that is it could be increased to 5, 6, or 10,000. And so tonight, anyway, they're going to air this thing, and we're all going to know going into it that he's going to lie in it. Then he's going to lie in it, and then we're all going to say, how could you have done such a thing? And the press will say, oh, darn it. And they'll fact check it, and they'll be very proud of themselves, and they might even accomplish it within a day. But these things take some time, and in 3 days there'll be news that something that sounded a little hinky in the speech is actually also a lie, and it's going to come out over a period of a week. Everyone will know it was garbage.
A lie travels around the world while the truth is getting its pants on.
Right. And so that will happen again. And believe it or not, the fact that this doesn't make any sense to you or me or those listening, because we're news junkies, but the truth is that the vast majority of America will see this thing either live or on the news or on YouTube or however they get their news and say, oh my God, there's an emergency at the border. And we'll have missed this whole thing, and we'll spend the next, I don't know how many months, believing that there is, in fact, an emergency at the border, and we should do something. Because it sounds like somehow America believes that something happening inside our own country could be a total mystery to all of us because I don't know what. Because there's no camera there, or I don't have a street cam showing me hordes of people. Somebody's idea of fact-checking somewhere on Twitter. I don't believe any fact-checking thing is going to work, but you might as well try some of them. But was to do a split screen of, a camera at the actual border where you'll see, nobody is coming.
Yeah, no,
What are
it's
we
funny
doing?
because remember all the caravan talk before the midterms.
Yes.
And we don't.
Oh, yeah.
No one's traveling with the caravans anymore.
Oh,
I don't
well,
know what
no.
happened.
Yesterday I noticed that one of the, Trump
Fox?
idiots that found his way into responding to something. I ignored it, but the thing he sent me was, there's another caravan forming. You can just do that at any time. Really? Yeah.
Yeah,
It's a caravan of,
yeah. Well,
Bigfoots.
just to bracket the caravan, by the way.
Yeah.
The by U.S. law and by international law, but most importantly, U.S. law, people have a right to present themselves at the border and seek asylum.
Yeah, no, America doesn't believe that. Trump still continues to say in almost every tweet about immigration is that people should be able, look, apply for citizenship where you are, and we'll, there's no reason to, and again, we see it every day. Look, it's not an application you fill out for citizenship. It's not something you send, put 2 box tops in a envelope and send it to the United States State Department and say you want to be a citizen. It doesn't go like that. And
are they going to station immigration judges in all the embassies? I mean,
yes.
I saw Pence's proposal about
absolutely
being able to apply for asylum at an embassy, which, by the way, that's just brilliant because then the repressive government that is the reason for the asylum could just put a camera there. So, okay, let's see who's walking into the embassy, and we can start arresting them as they walk out.
But how do you know that's what I was going to talk to them about? 1, what else would you be talking about? 2, we're a dictatorship. What do you mean? How can I tell? Who cares how I can tell? You're under arrest and throwing you out of a helicopter. That's what's happening. Oh, I was wrong? Darn.
Yeah.
I'm a dictator, you idiot.
Floated that, and I'd ask the same question. So we don't agree with you on any of these things. Why should I support your proposal? Because I'm right. Well, I don't think you're right. I think you're wrong. I mean, I get this whole political bargaining thing, like the immigration bill in 2013. It had $50 billion for border security. I don't think we need $50 billion for border security. I think the opposite. I think we should have, this is a hot button, but I'll say the quasi-open borders. That is, you come, you apply to get in, and if you qualify under our, basically lax requirements, you're not a criminal, you're not this, you're not that, you get in.
Yeah.
But that's me. Believe me, I know that no one agrees with me. This is my, like me wanting to repeal the Second Amendment. No one agrees with me with that either. I understand that.
Yes.
But my point is different. So I don't agree with your policy proposal, Mr. Vice President. What are you offering me to agree to that? Are you offering me statutory DACA? Are you offering me TPS?
No.
Are you offering me a bribe? Give me gateway funding for Schumer, who wants the Hudson Hudson tunnel crossings fixed.
Just cash would be good.
Just give me money. Like just Trump just demands money from people
I want
for
an
favors.
emolument.
So do we. Give us some money.
Congress approves this emolument. Let me have it. I got to distribute it on the floor in the form of checks like John Boehner used to do.
Exactly.
I
mean, at least, you're in a swamp, so be swampy. Offer me something.
Yes. No, we're draining that. Yeah. But like you said, even their dumb solution of you can apply at the embassies. All right. Well, how do you apply? What happens when you apply for asylum? You get in front of a judge. So now we're going to have, like you said, immigration judges in every embassy and consulate. By the way, who's going to take that job? You are posted overseas in a dictatorship, and you're the guy who is allowing their political dissidents to safely ferry themselves to the United States where they can speak out against the government. Are you going out for groceries tonight? No. Well, they would never lay hands on American citizens. Why not? They just chopped one into pieces in Saudi Arabia.
Yep.
Oh. Yeah, but we wanted that guy murdered. Oh, yeah. We didn't want the judges murdered. Who would do this job? You'll be killed, and America will say, I didn't think about that one."
Immigration judges.
Yes, right, exactly. Well, yeah, right. We'll just appoint somebody down there who's a member, who's already a citizen down there, but doesn't want to come here. They'll kill that guy. Nobody's going to do this job.
We want, in some countries. In Peru, I think specifically, the identity of judges had to be kept a secret because they were killing all the judges.
Yes. Ha ha ha! I laugh.
That's the truth.
Yeah,
It's a real story. It was like, okay, a drug kingpin says, well, yeah, you're going to put my guys in jail. Well, here, boom.
Yep.
Who's the next guy who wants to be a judge to put my guys in jail? You want to go? You want to do it? You want to be the next one? No, not me. So it's all nonsense. It's all lies.
Yeah.
And it's all going to be delivered from the Oval Office tonight.
Yeah.
Where another thing was, he would not dare to lie from the Oval Office, would he? Right, Glenn Kessler? Ugh.
Yeah, and even well-meaning objection here. I get this from a listener here who, let me see, shall I try pronouncing everything? Jikan, Jikan, 1921 here.
Okay.
But Chris Wallace, she says, was prepared and nailed Sarah Sanders on the 4,000 number. Why wouldn't the press be prepared for this tonight? And that one they would be prepared for. But again, this is not an interview. It's
I have
okay.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, okay.
There's the problem. Prepared for what?
Yeah, I mean, what
camera.
do you do? Do you break in and go, hold it, hey, yo, that, like I said, my proposed response is Joe Pesci from My Cousin Vinny. Everything that guy just said is, we can't say it on there. But you can't, what do you break in and say, no, 4,000, that's a lie. You got caught yesterday. Don't try to lie. He goes on and he drones on and he'll do it for 8, 10, 15 more minutes. And then the Democrats get to go. There's so you can't break in and say that wouldn't be fair, right? The anchor comes in. Okay, we're going to bring you the Democratic response. Before we do, 1, I'm going to take all the gas out of it by debunking everything. 2, I'm going to delay it for 20 minutes. No, you got to let the Democrats go. The Democrat who gets assigned this terrible job will be reading off a script which will have been written before, because if they do a live debunking, who knows what goes wrong with that one. If you get an extraordinarily talented Democrat, it can kind of be done. But if you've ever watched, here's the recommendation. Watch the morning proceedings, which usually take place afternoon, in the House of Representatives during the 1-minute speeches. Hardly anybody pays any attention to this. But yeah, this is what they do. All right, so you give 1-minute speeches. The basics of that, procedurally speaking, any member of the House can give a speech on any topic they want, more or less, for 1 minute. Useless, but people do it all the time. They deliver the message of the day. Usually it ends up being a coordinated thing. Each side, they say, we'll have 10 1-minute speeches. Sometimes they don't limit it. Sometimes they do. And occasionally, both sides, occasionally one side or the other will say, I need 10 members to speak on immigration. Today's the theme of the day. Everybody do 1 minute on immigration. Usually not. It's just whatever the hell you want to do. And it's more or less first come, first serve. They actually line up on the House floor. They get out there. And here's what happens on days like that, right? And say it's a coordinated thing on immigration. And up will come a Republican or a Democrat. A Democrat will say, there's no crisis at the border. It's all being made up by the president. It's nonsense. They just got caught in the lie about 4,000 terrorists being caught at the southern border. They caught her dead to rights right on the air. Chris Wallace nailed Sarah Sanders. And not only that, NBC News looked into what is the number, and the answer is 6. I've never heard such a bunch of liars. You should never believe a goddamn thing they say. And then there's the gavel. The gentleman's time has expired. Okay, fine. He goes and he sits down. For what purpose did the gentleman from Iowa rise? Mr. Speaker, I seek unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute. The gentleman may proceed. Up comes Steve King or whoever. And he'll say,
cantaloupes.
5,000 terrorists have been caught at the border just in the last 6 minutes. And they're all from ISIS. And they have, calves the size of cantaloupes. Plus, they all have drugs. And they swore on a stack of Bibles that they were here to murder your parents.
By throwing a bag of drugs on and dropping it on their head.
The gentleman's time has expired. And then comes the next Democrat, and they will say, the crisis is totally manufactured. The 4,000 is a lie. They just said it the other day, and Sarah Sanders got caught. And at home, you'll say, "Good, I'm glad you're correcting the record." But didn't you just hear Steve King say that it was 5,000? Why don't you say everything that guy just said is? He just lied to you. The first Democrat said the president's spokesperson was lying, and then the second person that got up here, who was a Republican, lied again. Same lie, but increased the number and made it worse. But my speech says Sarah Sanders, so that's what I'm going to talk about. And if I speak, by the way, about Steve King, he'll object, and in a Republican House, my words will be taken down because I've characterized the intentions of a member. But, and they will trade this over and over and over, and a Democrat will get up and say the same thing. Sarah Sanders said it yesterday, and it was a lie. And a Republican will follow up and make the lie worse immediately. And then the next Democrat will say nothing about what the previous guy just said. That's the way scripted rebuttals go. That's the way tonight's scripted rebuttal will go for the Democratic response. And then afterwards, after America is vomiting for 45 minutes between these two speeches, an unknown probably, or possibly an anchor will get up there and say, remember 40 minutes ago when the president said 4,000 people? Yeah, I know. You told me this yesterday. Well, here's 5 minutes on why that's true, because I have it ready. And then, nothing about, well, what about when the president said that they were coming to assassinate our premier, like they did in Spies Like Us? We don't have premiers, but and I had to bring you this regularly scheduled programming afterwards. I'm sorry. We'll have to leave it there. That's how the garbage fact-checking is going to go. Later on, MSNBC will go late into the night, rolling chyrons of everything that he said and stopping the tape, and you'll be asleep because you got to get up for work tomorrow, and you'll miss the whole thing. Then tomorrow you'll see bits and pieces of what Rachel Maddow had to say about it on YouTube, and those of us who pay attention to that will know, and the rest of the country will say, I guess there's an emergency. I heard on the news radio today, I turned it on for the weather on the 8s. But I tuned in on the 7s, so I'm screwed. I got to hear the president declared an emergency last night. Okay, and it's 35 degrees. Okay.
It's worse than that, though.
Oh, well, shoot.
Yeah, think about it. The 11 o'clock news is president gives Oval Office address declaring state of emergency due to immigrant invasion of the United States.
Yes.
Because that's how they do it.
Right. Or they won't have any time to say, oh, and there was a response. They'll tell you that later, but
later.
Not
page 17.
Right.
A17. So
I'm asleep.
Tomorrow
it came
morning,
after the
the New York Times will say on the top, Trump declares state of emergency.
Right. That will be fact.
Says border crisis requires immediate action.
Yeah, that might not be fact. Again, I have to caution everybody that he may declare an emergency on TV tonight, but the law will say there has to be this, and this listed on a piece of paper signed by the president, and he won't get around to that. And so even that will be a lie, that he declared a state of emergency. He said the word emergency. He just didn't do any of the things that the statute requires. Now, he may get to it, but we don't know, and no reporter will ask him to show the paper. You still have not seen Matt Whitaker's papers, ladies and gentlemen.
The norms of our journalism are not up to the times.
No, it's unfortunate, but it's true. And just like, all of the mechanisms that are at his control under a state of emergency were written when the president was a serious person who wouldn't lie, at least not intentionally, or at least when he did decide he was going to lie, was like, we got to have this nailed down because I'm about to go out there and lie, and I don't want to do it all on my own here. We got to have our story straight. We got to have people saying this stuff is true. We got to have other countries saying it's true. We got to have our appellate attorneys ready to freak judges out and make them lock everything down. But this guy just wings it. And I'm glad, as in a way, it's we did end up getting a more transparent White House than any other in the rest of our history. We know that everything he says is gobbledygook, and it only takes a few minutes to demonstrate it. It used to take years.
Yep.
So I guess
that's true, but and you also have to factor in you've got Fox News has already been saying, what the president wants to hear.
Yeah.
And, you have this Sinclair situation where a third of the local TV stations will have Boris Epstein saying the president's absolutely right.
Right.
And, you really need this, what was once referred to as the responsible press, to come forward and deal with the times we are living with.
Yeah.
They didn't during the 2016. They didn't really in the 2018 election. I mean, it was just, there were enough people, thank God, and hopefully there'll be enough in the next election so even though the media's failed, we as a electorate won't fail. We will stop him until he throws us all in jail, which could be next. Who knows?
Right.
But
maybe.
It's just a failure of a journalistic model. Jay Rosen's been writing about a lot about how they're going to cover 2020 lately. And he's very critical, and he's right. But it's day to day. It's not just in the terms of the horse race and the politics and who's going to win this election or that election. It's just everyday issues.
Yeah.
To me, this moment really crystallizes the actual and complete failure.
I think so.
He should not be given unfiltered time ever. That's why they shouldn't run his appearances. They should have them on 5-minute delay so that they can at least
minimum,
run a fact check beside it as it's being run. The man should not be allowed to speak live, unfiltered, on anybody's media outlet.
That's if you want everything, if you want to do your best to bring the truth. The other observation I guess I've been making in the last day or so is the great irony that in the end, Trump will end up being right in a way here, because tonight every major network is going to carry fake news live on the air, and will in fact make the news media the enemy of America. So for 8 minutes tonight, if we're lucky, which is garbage because he's going to go on, and once he realizes they're not going to turn the cameras off, they'll tell him that right before. By the way, if I go over the 8 minutes, what happens?
Yeah.
We're going to stay with you live until the subject, until your address is finished, Mr. President. Oh, you're kidding. You're crazy. All right.
I'll be here for an hour and a half.
Yeah. And another thing, there's no collusion and blah, blah, blah.
Exactly.
So why not? Why would you
Greatest
stop?
election in history. And
Yeah. Look at my electoral victory. Here's a map. He might have that ready. You got no idea how long this will go on for. So he may go forever. We don't really know. He'll say whatever he wants to say. And he loves ad-libbing, and that's when he gets in trouble. And so at what point will they not have fact checks ready by the time the anchors get back around to it? I mean, how could you do it? It's going to take 20 years to fact check what he blathers in 10, 15, 20, how long he goes on, minutes. I mean, he's done extemporaneous,
he does
20, 40-minute rally.
Now he goes on and on and on.
Yeah. He'll just do a rally speech, whatever he can remember of it. And if he stops remembering things, he'll just repeat the ones that he said that he does remember.
Exactly.
So I don't
remembers build the wall.
Right. So
remembers border crisis and drugs and yada yada. So he knows enough of those words, and then he'll throw in steel is back, baby, and coal industry's going gangbusters, and lie, which is again back to the central premise.
Mm-hmm.
You don't let a liar who lies about everything have unfiltered access to your airwaves.
Yeah.
If you believe
it's
in
not just
journalism.
air. It's not just air. Yesterday, I watched again in real time as the press broke the big news. Hey, everybody, the IRS will be issuing tax refunds despite the shutdown. Why? How does that happen? It is a story because, the government is shut down, and the Treasury is one of the departments that is shut down. The IRS works under Treasury. Those employees so far are non-essential, and it's the beginning of tax season, and people are going to start filing their tax paperwork and looking for tax refunds. And I guess there are probably some that are unpaid from last year, and people have weird tax situations. But those employees are furloughed, and we're going to need them back if people are going to expect H&R Block to be able to give them back their instant tax refunds. I guess you could do it out of H&R Block's pocket, but I don't think they're going to do it as long as the government's shut down. So it's an issue. It's a problem. Real people, real Americans, even people that Donald Trump cares about are going to be angry because the government isn't giving them money, which is, of course, socialism somehow when other people are doing it. But when you're doing it, it's your money. Anyway, those employees are supposedly going to be ordered back to work, unpaid, of course, to pay you money. And everybody is reading about it because the newspapers reported it, and the newspapers are reporting it because somebody in the administration said, we're going to order it. And normally something like that happens on paper. There is a memo that explains the law behind it, and then an order from somebody, whether it's the Treasury Secretary, an underling, perhaps the president, someone else. But there's paperwork that goes along with it. But the news media, over the years when presidents didn't lie like crazy, got to learn that, when a person in a suit from a department says this thing is happening, it's okay to break that news. You got to get it out there faster than the other guys anyway. And look, I have it on record. The Deputy Treasury Secretary said XYZ. That's it. News. Roll it. Go. What's your source on this? Deputy Secretary of the Treasury. Holy cow. Go. Stop the presses. But the truth is, the paperwork hasn't been signed, and in this administration, and we have learned by now, might never be signed, and it might not even exist, and it might not be the president's order, or he might not want that, or he might change his mind if Ann Coulter says to. It hasn't been done, and the press doesn't wait for the paper anymore because you don't want to be late with the news, and then it'll later turn out that order was not issued. Or it's illegal, and you're not doing it. It can't
you got a great example of the whole Syria thing.
John
Bolton,
that now, right?
Or Mike Bolton, as Trump calls him.
Steve Bolton. He calls everybody Steve.
Steve Bolton announced that, no, we're not really leaving Syria.
Yes.
I mean, you can cut through the morass, but that's what he said. We're going to stay fighting ISIS. Well, then you're not leaving.
Right. Of course
Trump
it was.
says the fake news says that's a different thing. It's exactly what I said. And of course, when you read what Trump said, it's absolutely the opposite of what Trump said.
Right.
So, the paper wasn't dry. The troops aren't home.
Yep.
John Bolton decided we're not going to do this. And Trump, for whatever reason, instead of slapping him when Madison, we shouldn't do this, he got fired.
Yes.
And John.
Now, Bolton says we shouldn't do this.
To say, well, we're
not doing it.
Then Mike is right. Mike said exactly what I said.
That's right. Meanwhile, I stuck this in pocket. I see international reporters of various stripes covering Syria saying President Erdogan of Turkey is apparently irate, suggesting that Turkey could now up the ante and repeat last month's goings-on, going directly through Trump. In other words, it says here, parenthetically, can hardly be faulted for thinking he had a deal. We didn't actually discuss exactly how the deal went down. We didn't get time. But again, somewhere in pocket is the news that we're pulling out. We all heard about we're pulling out of Syria. We all heard that Turkey had something to do with it. We're all worried about what Turkey is going to do there. There was a phone conversation because Trump loves talking on the phone, because he's from the 80s, whatever. So he talked a phone conversation between him and Erdogan, and basically Turkey said, you know what, you guys should get out of Syria and just leave northern Syria to us, which is, that's what the president of Turkey would say, and a real president of the United States would say, all right, yeah, I hear you, but you know how it is. We're going to be there. We're going to be winding down our presence, but we're going to, and instead, this guy, our Trump, said,
done.
Oh yeah, we should. You know what? You got it. You know what? It's yours. We're leaving. And the president of Turkey was like, okay, I guess. That's good. All right, so you're leaving? Yeah. So Erdogan walks away thinking he had a deal because the president of the MFing United States of America, or in some cases others people would say the MFing president of the United States of America. Could you have a better source if he was to go to his editor and say, hey, I got a scoop, boss. You'll never believe this one. The United States is leaving Syria. My God. You tell Parker I want pictures. Whatever that goes on in the stupid newsrooms. But this is the president of Turkey, and he says, wow, the United States is leaving. We have to start making preparations. There's a huge military deal here that we have to throw together because we got to occupy northern Syria now because there's going to be a power vacuum. Otherwise, the Russians are going to do it. He's getting ready to do it. And then here's the news. Oh, they're not going. Well, why not? Well, who told you they were going, you stupid president? I don't know. It was the president of the United States. He thought he had a deal. And now, lo and behold, even the dictators who thought, aren't we lucky? Trump, the United States president, loves dictators. I'm a dictator. This is a great time for me. And then it turns out, nope, you don't have a deal. The paper wasn't signed. And even if it was, I just ripped it up, as Trump is wont to do, apparently. We'll be right back to talk about more of this later. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com.
In a civil way, he said, well, yeah, the president said that, but, he says a lot of things.
Right. We are back live with the show. We've abandoned the idea of commercial breaks, by the way. When there's two people on the air, forget about it. We're just talking. You missed the good stuff, although, honestly, we didn't say anything.
I don't think it was that. It wasn't that good.
that you hadn't heard already. It was just more of the same.
About it, and I think it goes back to what's basic. There are no scoops. Nobody told you something that's true. Jonathan Swan. Remember, Jonathan Swan said, "Oh, this is happening," and it didn't happen.
Which was that? I don't know.
I forget. It was that he got all tested.
I've lost track
about it. It was
so no, I don't remember.
Somebody was resigning, or something was happening.
Okay.
It might even been Kristen Nielsen's getting fired, or something stupid like that.
Well, that's.
And as you know, Kristen Nielsen has not been fired.
No, she has not. And so I would say IRS refunds. I don't know. Wait and see.
Somebody mentioned something about that.
Leaving Afghanistan.
We'll see if it's true.
Yeah, I don't know. Matt Whitaker is the acting AG. Maybe not. Again, we're like 3 months into this. I think this is still the case. No one has showed me any different. But doesn't anybody think it's weird that the routine paperwork, I hereby appoint, not only have we not seen it,
you would
but
just
people
release it. Here it is, a little press
people
packet.
People have asked and said, well, "That's weird, but we haven't had it. Can I have that?" No. What? How am I? And then they, normally a reporter would say, "How am I supposed to believe anything that you say now?" And this administration says, "I don't know." But you seem not to have much difficulty doing it because every day you print a newspaper and it's full of me saying I did things and I didn't. So I'm not going to stop now.
Absolutely correct. I mean, it reminds me of something. Today is the 2nd year anniversary of the famous press conference with Trump's tax attorneys with a big stack of blank papers saying that he was separating himself from his businesses.
Yes. And we all just said, okay, he is. And then we found out he wasn't, although at the time everybody said he's probably not. And it wasn't 10 minutes before people were saying, I think all those papers are blank. I mean,
the papers were blank. They came and put a big stack of blank papers out there, pretended this is all the paperwork we did. I said, I believe you. There's nothing on those papers. You didn't even type all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy on them. You didn't do anything. At least type something on them.
No. No, I'm not going to.
It's been lies, and don't believe anything from before he was president. And I would mark the 2-year anniversary of the continued lie after lie after lie. And, of course, I chimed in. This Walt Schaub was the guy who tweeted about it. And I did my own little thing. I said, yeah, and a few weeks later, the GSA says, no, don't worry that you're violating the lease. We're going to overlook that and let you take emoluments from foreign countries and state governments in violation of the Constitution because we're the GSA and we're scared of Trump.
Yep.
And that's fine. And by the way, when do we start this oversight stuff, by the way? I'm ready for it. We've been she's been speaker for a week. What's going on?
Well, the committees are actually moving on those things, but these things, the thing they always say, it takes time. And it's true, but we'll start
seeing... It takes a couple of weeks. You want to actually be prepared.
Yes.
You want to have your documents, and you want to have a meaningful session of
they're hiring
where
staff.
you ask tough questions. I get that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
It's
I'm
true,
ready
but
for that.
I would like them to begin already. It's true, and but yeah, it can't happen fast enough. But yeah, and oh, by the way, end of last week, the very tail end of last week, we told you, and I think the news had broken. Again, I don't do the investigative journalism, but it exploded over the weekend, and suddenly everybody else began talking about over the weekend and the beginning of this week. Oh my God, did you know that the old post office tower is still fully staffed with National Park Service employees because it's attached, of course, it's the same building as the Trump International Hotel, and Trump's guests can't be inconvenienced. It's one of the sites they want to see. The other parks in the country are overflowing with human waste, but this one is open. And once again, we read you the news that everybody else was going to finally be gabbing about a couple of days early. So there you have that follow up.
There's
Totally,
a million things.
yeah. There are a million things. I can't get to them all. But these are the important ones.
Apparently neither can the House. Come
right.
on, Nancy.
What are you waiting for?
I'm kidding. Give them another week or two.
Okay.
But then I'll really start complaining. But I'm going to stop complaining today because I actually have to go. Thanks for going all over this.
This is how Trump's thing will end.
I know they're doing it. There's still things they can do with this thing. I think a live fact check somehow can be done because you got to know what some of the things he's going to say. You should be prepared with your chyrons.
Yeah.
Saying the president is lying. Yeah, this is not true.
Yep, they won't be, but they could be partially ready. And
they will not do it. And let's be honest. Right. We know they're not going to do it.
Well, that's clear. MSNBC will try to do a thing, and it'll be a little bit afterwards, and it's better than nothing, but if there was really nothing, like there was no speech, then we wouldn't have to worry about what was better than nothing. Who cares what's better than nothing? We're getting nothing.
He could give a speech. You just don't give him your airways. I mean,
he does. He's given speeches left and right, not on the air. What's the problem? He just tweeted. Remember, this is the guy who ran for the other part of his platform, besides Mexico will pay for it, is I don't need the media. I'm going to go around. They're liars anyway. I'm going to go around them. I'm going to tweet directly to the people. Tweet your speech.
Tweet your speech.
Tweet it. Not that we haven't seen it already, but tweet it.
Put it on the Trump channel or whatever the heck.
The Gorilla channel, which turned into the Trump channel.
There was a Trump channel, though, wasn't there? Wasn't one of Trump's daughters-in-laws? I think Eric's wife. Oh,
yeah, right. They were going to try to do a... whichever one is Laura. I think that's she was going to do a Trump TV. That was remember, that was the plan. Oh, well, he's going to lose the presidency. He's not going to win. So our transition in a way is we're going to replace the fake news media with Trump TV news. And then he won, and she still needed something to do. So they said, we're going to have that.
So all right. Well, anyway, I won't be tuning into Trump TV tonight, but...
Good for you.
I will watch on Twitter, which is always the way to watch these things.
Yes, I agree.
Okay.
Very good.
All right, David, good luck.
Thanks.
And enjoy the rest of the show.
Yeah, hope we have a country tomorrow. See ya. Okay, thanks, Armando. So other things that we can catch up on. I don't know. We're going to end up back on this topic, but here's something I meant to blurt out the other day, and it's semi-related. The transition I'll make is this. Somebody somewhere, a Democrat somewhere, has caught on to the general trend that they're making everything up. So, here's the deal. You remember when we heard a few weeks ago that in Michigan and Wisconsin, they were following the North Carolina model, the Republicans there were, by stripping the incoming Democratic governors of their powers while they still had legislative control or Republican control of the legislature. And in particular here, I'm talking about Wisconsin. Happened, like we said, in Michigan. In Wisconsin, same thing. Scott Walker loses. Tony Evers is coming in as governor. He can do all sorts of things. He can undo all sorts of things that Scott Walker did. He can do all kinds of new things. Republicans at the time, and I guess do they still have a majority in the legislature? Otherwise, I guess you could just undo it legislatively later on. But the Republican lame duck legislature began stripping powers from the governorship before Tony Evers could come in and claim them and exercise them, to the Republicans' detriment later on. Or I guess you could say to the benefit of the people of Wisconsin, and also coincidentally to the detriment of Republicans. Well, I think this is well advised for his approach. And I grabbed a diary that expressed it nicely in the headline the other day. Blue Tuesday wrote this thing way back in the olden days of January 3rd. Wrote the, all right, we see that it's, now get rid of this pop-up here, please, that says it's Blue Tuesday. I saw that. Get out of my face now. New Wisconsin Governor Tony Evers, Democrat, plans to ignore lame duck power grab, tells Republicans, sue me. Yeah, one of the things you can do in the face of a purported power grab by lame duck Republican legislators claiming to have adopted measures and claiming to have seen those measures signed by outgoing Republican Governor Scott Walker to strip powers from the governorship. One of the things you can do with that is say, I don't believe you've stripped me of that power. I am going to exercise that power. Well, you can't because we stripped it from you. Yeah, well, then what do you do when a governor exercises powers you think aren't his to exercise as a matter of law? What do you do about that? You sue. Now, you may win or you may lose, and we plan to make a case that you should lose. But in the meantime, just because you guys say you are the Wisconsin state legislature and you purport to have passed this thing which you believe has the force of law doesn't mean it does. The courts could still say it does, but I'd like to ask them, and I'll ask every single one of them that I'm entitled to ask, by which I mean all the way up to the Supreme Court of the state, because I'm not necessarily just going to take the answer of the district level court here. Of course, if it goes my way, I'll be happy to take it, but you won't. You may sue. But we're absolutely going to have this contest in court. What do I have to listen to you for? You're fake news. I like the approach. That's not exactly how he's saying it, but like I said, I do like the approach. Now, it is noted at the beginning of this diary that this story originally appeared at Progressives Everywhere, which you can find at progressiveseverywhere.org. And credit where credit is due there. And so here's how Blue Tuesday puts it. Tony Evers has seen this before. When he was Wisconsin's state schools superintendent, the GOP-controlled legislature and Governor Scott Walker tried to limit his powers. He sued them over it, and the Wisconsin Supreme Court ruled in his favor. So he's learned a lesson there, hasn't he? So after deposing Walker in November's gubernatorial election, he's not surprised that the GOP came after him again, passing a sheaf of last-minute laws in a lame duck session that would severely restrict his ability to do his job and fulfill the promises he made to voters. So once again, he plans to rely on the courts to protect his right to do the job to which he was democratically elected. This via the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. This quote here, he suggested he wouldn't go along with parts of those wide-ranging measures, but wouldn't specify which ones. Why should he? The new laws limit his authority over state rules, require him to get permission from lawmakers to adjust public benefits programs, and diminish his say over the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation. Having gone through this in my previous job as state superintendent, I think it's more likely that I will be sued because I'm now the chief executive of the state. Evers said in a potential legal fight over the lame duck legislation. Same thing happened when I was state superintendent. I was sued, so that's where I anticipate most of the action to be. Evers didn't specify which restrictions he would ignore, but he did lay out an ambitious first budget and agenda which can give us a few clues. According to the Journal Sentinel report, he's aiming to, quote, expand health insurance coverage under the ACA, allow illegal immigrants to qualify for driver's cards, give immigrants, why say even illegal, but okay, you know how it goes. People slip up. Give immigrants who came to the state illegally, again, as children, the chance to pay in-state tuition, and allow property taxes to rise by more than they have in the past. Everyone loves that. The health insurance aspect is telling, as one of the GOP's lame duck power grab laws was taking away the executive branch's ability to pull out of the infamous Obamacare lawsuit that is currently making its way through the courts after a disastrous opinion in Texas last month. Evers says he won't fight the changes that Republicans made to Scott Walker's corporate lobbyist piggy bank, the state's Economic Development Corporation, which means he can't appoint its new leader until September. His budget won't eliminate the group, given the restrictions placed on him, but look for its influence to be diminished during Evers' term. There's a bit more here. Shall we continue? Evers says he won't fight the changes that Republicans made. Oh, I'm sorry. We've got that one. Wisconsin's Supreme Court has 2 big elections in the next 2 years, which could make a big difference in how the lawsuits over executive power are decided. This spring, liberals will defend the seat of a retiring justice, and in 2020, a conservative seat will be open for the taking. In this spring's election, the stakes will be especially high, though it's technically nonpartisan. Republican-backed candidate Brian Hagedorn, we'll guess at Hagedorn, was Walker's chief legal advisor before Walker appointed him to the District 2 Court of Appeals. His Democratic-backed opponent, Lisa Neubauer, also sits on the court. Also of note, there are already lawsuits that filed that challenge the GOP's awful restriction on early voting, which hit record highs in Wisconsin this fall and helped Evers knock off Walker. Former Attorney General Eric Holder's group, the National Redistricting Foundation, is involved in that effort. It's good to see Democrats playing hardball and no longer just sulking before succumbing to Republican treachery or waiting on courts to fix it years later. At the same time, we're getting to the point that laws are sort of meaningless and we're descending into a hellish anarchy. That does kind of suck, doesn't it? Unfortunately, it makes totally electorally obliterating Republicans before they get the message that their crap will no longer be tolerated for us to get back to some kind of state of political normalcy. For more stories like this one about state politics, progressive activism, and crucial updates on policies that matter, I'll give them the free plug, right? Subscribe to the free Progressives Everywhere newsletter. Don't worry, they won't bombard your inbox. I'll throw that in there for free, too. Feel free to send me a big fat check for reading your piece on here. It's a good one, and I was happy to do it, and people should know about all of the local, state level, and local level progressive blogs everywhere. It's a big deal for us here at Daily Kos to see that blogosphere flourishes to the extent we have anything to say about it. Why not? All right, so that's just a bit of a diversion from what can or should be occupying our attention on the national level for most of the day. There's more, of course, and I guess really I ought to at least begin on this piece, and I'll save all the other juicy stuff for later. But I mentioned that there was another raft of stories out there that discuss what a president can do in the state of an emergency. The Atlantic has this piece from Elizabeth Goitein, I'm guessing at the pronunciation, and it's relatively new. You've probably seen it passed around on Twitter. Maybe you've had a chance to read it, maybe not. What the president could do if he declares a state of emergency. Depending on how broad the state of emergency is and in what form it comes, there's a wide range of powers. This is the piece that most people are passing around. There are some weedier ones that I think we would all do well to read and digest, but I'm going to start with this one. The subheader here, from seizing control of the internet, does anyone here use the internet, to declaring martial law. Martial. President Trump may legally do all kinds of extraordinary things. Are you ready for this? In the weeks leading up to the 2018 midterm elections, President Donald Trump reached deep into his arsenal, thank you very much, to try to deliver votes to Republicans. Most of his weapons were rhetorical, featuring a mix of lies and false inducements, claims that every congressional Democrat had signed on to an open borders bill, right? None had, of course, there is no such bill. That liberals were fomenting violent mobs. They weren't. That a 10% tax cut for the middle class would somehow pass while Congress was out of session. It didn't. Does everybody remember that? You're not getting your tax refunds, even though the tax cut never came through. But remember that he actually said, we're going to do a middle class tax cut. Probably November, right? It's January. It didn't happen. But a few involved the aggressive use and threatened misuse of presidential authority. He sent thousands of active duty soldiers to the southern border to terrorize a distant caravan of desperate Central American migrants, announced plans to end the constitutional guarantee of birthright citizenship by executive order, and tweeted that law enforcement had been strongly notified to be on the lookout for, all caps, illegal voting. These measures failed to carry the day, and Trump will likely conclude that they were too timid, probably because he thinks he actually did them. Nothing changed, and I actually did those things, so he had to get more aggressive. How much further might he go in 2020 when his own name is on the ballot, or sooner than that if he's facing impeachment by a House under Democratic control, or just needs to regain the narrative, right? More is at stake here than the outcome of one or two elections. Trump has long signaled his disdain for the concepts of limited presidential power and democratic rule. Those things suck, right? During his 2016 campaign, he praised murderous dictators. He declared that his opponent, Hillary Clinton, would be in jail if he were president, goading crowds into the frenzied chants of lock her up. He hinted that he might not accept an electoral loss. As democracies around the world slide into autocracy and nationalism and anti-democratic sentiment are on vivid display among segments of the American populace, Trump's evident hostility to key elements of liberal democracy cannot be dismissed as mere bluster. It would be nice to think that America is protected from the worst excesses of Trump's impulses by its democratic laws and institutions. After all, Trump can do only so much without bumping up against the limits set by the Constitution and Congress and enforced by the courts. Those who see Trump as a threat to democracy comfort themselves with the belief that these limits will hold him in check. But will they? Unknown to most Americans, a parallel legal regime allows the president to sidestep many of the constraints that normally apply. The moment the president declares a, quote, national emergency, a decision that is entirely within his discretion, more than 100 special provisions become available to him. While many of these tee up reasonable responses to genuine emergencies, some appear dangerously suited to a leader bent on amassing or retaining power. For instance, the president can, with a flick of his pen, his Sharpie, his crayon, activate laws allowing him to shut down many kinds of electronic communications inside the United States, or freeze Americans' bank accounts. Other powers are available even without a declaration of emergency, including laws that allow the president to deploy troops inside the country to subdue domestic unrest. The edifice of extraordinary powers has historically rested on the assumption that the president will act in the country's best interest when using them. They weren't counting on a Russian double agent using them, right? With a handful of noteworthy exceptions, this assumption has held up. But what if a president, backed into a corner and facing electoral defeat or impeachment, were to declare an emergency for the sake of holding on to power? In that scenario, our laws and institutions might not save us from a presidential power grab. They might be what takes us down. Next section, a loaded weapon. The premise underlying emergency powers is simple. The government's ordinary powers might be insufficient in a crisis, and amending the law to provide greater ones might be too slow and cumbersome. Emergency powers are meant to give the government a temporary boost until the emergency passes, or there is time to change the law through normal legislative processes. Unlike the modern constitutions of many other countries, which specify when and how a state of emergency may be declared and which rights may be suspended, the U.S. Constitution itself includes no comprehensive separate regime for emergencies. Those few powers it does contain for dealing with certain urgent threats, it assigns to Congress, not the President. For instance, it lets Congress suspend the writ of habeas corpus, that is, allow government officials to imprison people without judicial review. Quote, when in cases of rebellion or invasion, the public safety may require it, and, quote, provide for the calling forth the militia to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions. Those both, of course, from the Constitution. Nonetheless, some legal scholars believe that the Constitution gives the president inherent emergency powers by making him Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, or by vesting in him a broad, undefined, quote, executive power, unquote. At key points in American history, presidents have cited inherent constitutional powers, like George W. Bush did. That's the key one you may remember, when taking drastic actions that were not authorized or in some cases were explicitly prohibited by Congress. Notorious examples also include some Democrats, right? Franklin Roosevelt's internment of U.S. citizens and Japanese residents of Japanese descent during World War II. George W. Bush's programs of warrantless wiretapping and torture after the 9/11 terrorist attacks. Abraham Lincoln conceded that his unilateral suspension of habeas corpus during the Civil War was constitutionally questionable, but defended it as necessary to preserve the Union. The Supreme Court has often upheld such actions or found ways to avoid reviewing them, at least while the crisis was still in progress. Rulings such as Youngstown Sheet and Tube Company v. Sawyer, the Youngstown case that Armando talked about earlier, in which the court invalidated Harry Truman's bid to take over steel mills during the Korean War, have been the exception. And while those exceptions have outlined important limiting principles, the outer boundary of the president's constitutional authority during emergencies remains poorly defined. Now, at this point, I will say this is clearly where you want to start in terms of the framework for how we get to the suspension of the various restrictions on the president. But there are much more pointed collections of specific issues or specific statutes that change when a emergency is declared. And I guess the driest recitation of it is something that Greg provided me with a link to yesterday from the Association of State and Territorial Health Officials, an emergency authority and immunity toolkit, they call it. This about the National Emergencies Act, sections 201 and 203, the sorts of areas listed here that discuss the various provisions of law that can be waived under a state of emergency and the mechanics of how the state of emergency are actually declared. So that is definitely of some interest to see if the president actually manages to do this thing correctly. Other information from the lawfare piece that Armando referred to earlier, some quick bullet points that once we get past the question of whether or not he can use a national emergency to fund the wall or to have the army build the wall, are down here if you scroll a little bit further down. What statutes authorize the redirection of funds during national emergencies? What is the initial predicate for invoking these authorities? Is it hard for a president to declare a national emergency? Does any national emergency count at all for purposes of these statutes that we're invoking? Assume that there is a right kind of national emergency. Does any spending go at that point? Can a decision to invoke either statute be challenged in court? Let's assume that someone has standing. Won't the courts just defer to the commander-in-chief here? And more out there. There's also a long list out there of specific provisions of law that kick in piecemeal, one after the other, once a national emergency is declared. And if we had another hour, and we'll find some more time later in the week, we would have more opportunity to go through all of those things. But as it is today, we have to close out the show for today. And, I guess at this point, we sit and wait and see what exactly is it that the president does with his stolen airtime tonight, and what do we really have to worry about? I mean, I guess if he doesn't actually declare a state of emergency, then all of that goes out the window. But there's an awful lot out there that, I guess if we come to it, we'll have to run through those things tomorrow and Thursday and Friday. Hang on and wait and see. We'll see we'll see what happens. We'll see what develops tonight. In the meantime, how can you pass the time between now and finding out whether the Republic survives? Part of the answer is, with the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, of course. That comes up next right here on Netroots Radio, not to be too glib about it. What has he got in store for you? Justice has a great raft of stories lined up as always. The White House would like you to believe the wall is all about stopping criminals and terrorists, but it's really so that Trump can put his name on it. That's his signature issue, of course. Other issues that he'll be addressing today: Florida officials vow to register disenfranchised voters despite Governor-elect Rod DeSantis' objections. Military leaders tried to use Fox News to make Trump care about the troops. Did you hear about that one? That's a great story from out of Afghanistan. And Blackwater founder Eric Prince says his interview with Mueller's team was worse than a proctology exam.
From
really
Daily Coos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
But we hope we didn't alarm you too badly today. By the way, one more story up for grabs on Justice Putnam's program coming up next. A 20-year-old suspect is arrested in Frankfurt for the massive German politician hack and the abrupt resignation of the World Bank president. Oh no, opens up new challenges internationally for Trump.